Hey guys, Based on Horrors here, and a little over a year ago, I uploaded a video called True Horror Stories 14, Monsters of North American Legend. This is my most popular video, actually leading views by 24,000 right now at this recording, coming in at a total of 27,000. So obviously this is a topic that you guys like to hear about, and I myself actually enjoys reading about, so I'm making a part 2. So, please sit back, relax, and enjoy these anxiety-inducing tales of monsters of North American legend. Story number 1. I'm a skeptic, but I've seen the Windigo. I'm the sort of person who is skeptical of any claims regarding the existence of the supernatural. My wife claims to see ghosts and dead people, and that she's an empath, and I'll concede that she's a very good guesser regarding other people's emotions and the history of places and families. But I can't accept her statements as fact, because they're not empirically probable. With that said, you could either believe me or not, but what I'm about to say is something that even I have a lot of trouble disbelieving. Now, I can't say I've had any paranormal experiences in my life, but there are several things that happened to me when I was quite young that I simply can't explain. By the time I was about 12 to 18 months old, I either had a memory or a very vivid imagination of my life before birth. I was floating up in the sky, standing on thin air with no land in any direction. In front of me was a kindly middle-aged Native American man wearing a plain white robe. He asked me if I was ready. Some kind of vision flashed before my eyes, and when I said yes, I somehow descended and experienced my own birth. Keep in mind, this is before I was able to comprehend what birth was, and I also didn't know about Native Americans yet. When I was about 6 or 7, I started getting very distinct mental images of something extremely disturbing. What I saw was a tanned, mummified-looking, emaciated dead face. The eyes were glassy, but somehow horribly alive. The lips and nose were shrunken. The creepiest thing about the face was the too wide smile and a full set of very white teeth. When I was 9 or 10, I read for the first time about some expedition or other in the Antarctic, where several ill-fated members of the expedition group died and were left behind. Their bodies were recovered in the 20th century, and the article I was reading had images of them. I had never seen a frozen body before, but as soon as I saw those pictures, I immediately correlated what I was reading with the thing I'd seen earlier in life. From that point onward, I started having almost real waking visions, in a way that's hard to explain, more than just my mind's eye, yet not exactly as if it were in front of me, of something that is basically my worst nightmare. It was an 8 or 9 foot tall, I know this because its head almost touched the ceiling, frozen corpse, completely naked, with long arms and legs. It was the same face I'd seen before in my mind, with the shrunken features, etc., only now it had a full body that was just as emaciated and mummified as the head and neck were. I only saw it on cloudy days in the late fall or winter, and always when it was between me or a window, so it was sort of backlit. It never made any motion to do anything, just stared down at me with that horrible grin. In high school, I got onto Wikipedia at some point and finally learned what the thing was. The Windigo. For those who don't know, it's a mythical spirit creature in Algonquin legend. I was born in Connecticut and have about 1% Native American blood in me from about 400 years ago. My first traceable ancestors in America came over shortly after the Mayflower, and one of them married a Native American woman. Now do you see why I'm so creeped out? Anyway, according to the legend, the Windigo was an evil spirit associated with starvation, the winter, and cannibalism. It either lured desperate people into eating their fellow humans during the winter, or possessed those who did resort to cannibalism. There are various stories about how it looked, but most of them agree that it looks like a frozen corpse, generally taller than a human. And no, it doesn't have antlers like in all the modern depictions you'll find via Google search. It reportedly can ride on the winter wind, mimic human voices to lure the wary into ambushes, and has a heart made of ice. Here's the thing. I experienced this before I ever identified what the creature was or knew about the legends. Only after almost a decade of intermittently seeing Windigo did I come across this description, courtesy of the Wikipedia article. The Windigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation. His desiccated skin was pulled tautly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against the skin. Its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Windigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from its grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. It was unclean and suffering from suppurations of the flesh. The Windigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and composition, of death and corruption. I've done some further research, and all of the information I found from various sources all concurs with what I saw. So, I'm remotely linked to the Native Americans with whom the legend originated. I have always had a deathly, no pun intended, fear of dead bodies, especially mummified-looking ones. And I saw the creature from their stories long before I learned that what I saw matched the traditional descriptions perfectly. I was and still am skeptical, but even I can't ignore these coincidences. I'm also a Christian Presbyterian, and therefore I'm quite wary of any claims of ghosts or supernatural entities inhabiting the world due to my beliefs. But even so, this thing has stuck with me for years. I saw it earlier today, which is why I'm here at all. Anyone got any insight? I've considered seeking out a highly knowledgeable Algonquin person to figure out what to do, but I'm torn, because I also have some reservations about that from a religious perspective. Also, I promise that this post is sincere and not a fictional account that should be posted elsewhere. It sounds pretty fantastic even to me, the person who experienced it, but I cannot shake the feeling that this just isn't my imagination. Edit. I forgot to mention, I was born in Connecticut and moved to South Carolina when I was about 7. I've been seeing it here into the South for almost 20 years now, even though I moved all across the state during that time. Not sure if that's relevant, because the Algonquins are situated in Virginia and up in Canada, if I understand it right, and never came this far south. Story number 2. I think I've had an experience someone help. Me and my roommate at college decided to go camping at a place just above our college one day. We had got up there and unpacked our tent, and soon realized that we had forgot the poles. I know. So we pack up and start to head down the mountain. At this time, it's about to storm, around 9 p.m. in late winter, and it's dead silent in the woods. My friend had fallen and hurt his knee, so I grabbed some of the gear he brought too, and called for a buddy to meet us at the bottom of the mountain. A side note is that we had usually whistled to each other while hiking because it's easier than shouting. Anyway, I hear a particular whistle, which is a unique one, sort of like the one from Assassin's Creed, coming from down the mountain. Assuming it was our friend waiting for us at the bottom, I whistled back until he calls us and asks if we were whistling at him. We told him no, I just whistled back at you. And he tells me he had heard 2 distinct whistles. Then, I hear the same whistle again, coming from behind me up the mountain. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but later on, I realized it smelled like ozone around the mountain, and when I described this to my fiance, she got chills and told me about the goatman of Appalachia that supposedly smells like ozone and mimics its potential victims. I'm not sure what it was, but I am damn sure it wasn't a bird. Story 3. Possible Skinwalker sighting in Mesa Verde, Colorado. My friend and I were driving up to a friend's camp in Mesa Verde, Colorado. We're driving up, and we go through this tunnel that has an urban legend of it being haunted. And if you stop in the middle of the tunnel, you'll see something come out of the shadows, stand in the middle of the road, and stare. Me and my friend didn't believe this shit for a second. We're going through the tunnel, having a good time. We were making fun of the urban legends, saying skinwalkers are nothing but old Indian tales. We were coming out on the other end when something runs out in front of us and I have to slam on my brakes. I drive a Honda Civic, so my car is pretty low to the ground, but I swear that this creature's back was as tall as my windshield. It had tan, rough skin. Not hair, skin. It stops, looks at us for roughly 15 seconds, then nonchalantly strolls to the other side of the road where there's another creature watching and waiting for it to come to the other side. As soon as it's on the other side of the road, I hightail it up out the mountain, trying to get to our friend's camp ASAP. My mind was so scared, I hardly got to see details, but my friend was bawling, saying that it spoke to her through eye contact. She said it had a dog-human hybrid face, and it told her that she shouldn't make fun of things she doesn't understand. I'm trying to calm her down, thinking that she's just freaking herself out, and as I'm driving, I'm looking at the sides of the road where I see these small creatures staring at us through the tall grass. They're not moving or anything, just watching. At this point, I'm starting to get really freaked out. We get to our friend's camp, and he has a camper. Thank God. I was not sleeping in a tent after that shit. We start drinking, and eventually forget what happened. We're all cleaning up, getting ready for bed, when we hear the loudest scream we have ever heard. It was so loud and long, I had to cover my ears. It was like a banshee getting murdered. It was the worst sound I have ever heard in my life. So we're all in the bedroom, too afraid to be by ourselves, when we hear sniffing around the camper, like a dog does when it's sniffing stuff out. It did this for 20 minutes that felt like 2 hours. We eventually got so tired that we passed out, and this morning we woke up, remembered what happened, and packed up all our shit in about 10 minutes. He got his camper hooked up in 5. It is honestly the scariest thing I have ever experienced, and I will never be visiting again, even in the daytime. Don't speak upon things you know nothing about, because there's always a possibility that it might exist. Story number 4. I think I encountered a Windigo. My wife and I have been running the rat race for years, with a family, a house in the city, 2 dogs, a cat, the stereotypical American dream. But the city took its toll, the neighborhood got worse, the crime rose, and we found ourselves looking for a way out. Our opportunity came when I was offered a new job out of state. It was a great career move, but we didn't want to move to a new city just to have the same problem again. So we started looking around and found a great mountain community about an hour and a half from the job, and a great ranch-style home with a big back porch, windows everywhere, and a lot of property. The backyard has a big grassy area and a creek that cuts the property in half. Then, acres of woods beyond. It's huge. The house is more than twice the size of our house in the city. It's all updated and has no neighbors within a mile. It's a radical change from the life we lived in the city, but best of all, it was less than half of what we were paying for our old house. The house was a foreclosure, and when we asked the listing agent about it, she simply said that the old family had abandoned the property. We really didn't think anything of it. The first 3 months were uneventful, with us settling into our new life, the kids getting used to a new school and new friends, and most of all, us getting used to a big house and property. But then, the weather turned cold, and things started to get weird on the property. It started with noises from the backyard, things that we chalked up to just being things in the woods. But then the motion lights around the house started going off randomly. Once again, we just chalked it up to things being in the woods. But last night, it all changed. Last night was the most terrifying night of my life. One of the dogs was at the back door whining and scratching, and so I assumed he needed to go to the bathroom. So I grabbed my flashlight and walked out the back door. Instantly, something fell off. The dog bolted for the back property, growling and snarling. It was a cold night, about 30 degrees, but the dog plunged straight into the creek and out the other bank, running off into the woods in the back of the property. Flashlight bouncing, I ran after him, calling his name. I got to the creek and made my way across the makeshift bridge, trying desperately to follow him. I could hear the dog still growling and barking from somewhere up ahead, and I pushed further away from the safety of the house and deeper into the woods. That's when I heard it. A shriek like I've never heard before in my life. It was a mix of a moaning wail and metal on metal. It echoed through the trees and froze me in my tracks. My dog bounded its way back to me and cowered down behind me. I turned around and could just make out the warm glow of the house behind me and the dark ahead of me. I swung my flashlight around wildly, looking for the source of the noise. That's when I heard an even more terrifying noise. Out of the cold silence, I heard my wife's voice floating all around me. "Babe," the voice called out. I whipped back around and could just barely make out the image of my wife, safely inside our house. The voice called out again. "Babe, I'm right here," came the voice from deeper into the woods. Then came another voice, just as clear as the other. It was my dad's voice. "Come out here," it called. I swung the flashlight around again, and this time caught the briefest glint of light, bouncing off of eyes. The creature was in my light for barely a second, but it was tall, maybe 6 feet, and ashen white. It had long, spindly fingers that grasped the trunk of the pine tree, and then it was gone. I turned back and ran towards the house. I ran headlong into the icy creek and stumbled. My dog ran past me, making it back to the yard and up to the porch. I dug my hands into the freezing muddy bank and pulled myself out, not stopping to look back. When I reached the porch, I scrambled inside. My wife ran over to me, asking what had happened. I just shook my head. I'm not certain myself what happened. I had a growing sense of dread tonight as the sun began to fall. We kept the dogs inside, and I haven't dared to look out the back. But as I sit here typing, one by one, my motion lights in the backyard keep going on. Story number 5. I think my neighbor's cat warded off a skinwalker. My father died about 5 years ago unexpectedly from a heart attack. To say it was hard on my mother and I was an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel like home anymore. About a year later, Mom and I made plans to take ourselves and our elderly dog Ace on a move further south to a small town situated about half an hour from Atlanta. Just a few days before we were slated to move, however, I had one of the most vivid dreams I've ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom, a picture-perfect recreation of the real thing. And sometimes I wonder if I was in some sort of sleep paralysis state when it occurred. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night, the streetlights right across the street would illuminate through my window, creating a light reflection on the wall perpendicular. And in my dream, as I lay there staring at the exact same reflection on the wall, I saw this orb of smoke fade in from the shadows. Goosebumps chilled across my skin as I lay there, panicked and afraid to move a muscle. Suddenly, it stopped moving and steadily hung in the light's reflection, as if it was staring at me. Without warning, it spoke to me in my dead father's voice. "I'm sending someone to watch you." Despite hearing my father's voice come from the orb, I was terrified of it, and I didn't know why. And yet, I managed to squeak out a small reply towards it. "What?" I whispered. The orb remained quiet for a few moments, leaving an eerily dead silence in the voice's place. Just as quickly, it spoke to me one final time. "Damn, black." I woke up almost instantaneously, gasping for breath. The nightmare had chilled me to my very core. I didn't know exactly what to make of it, especially those two final words. I chalked it up to maybe Dad wishing us well on our move, but at the time, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was some kind of warning. Within the next couple of weeks, my mother and I moved out of Knoxville and headed down south to Georgia. She had managed to find a quaint little house for us, with only one or two neighbors down a gravel road in the middle of the woods. It was a nice fit for us. Probably the best reliever of all the stress that came with the move, however, was our new neighbor's cat. She was a petite, older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as if it was my own pet. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her, and even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she would always run up to me. She helped ease my tensions about leaving Knoxville behind, especially without Dad there with us. Less than a month into our new house, I awoke suddenly to a faint coughing that sounded as if it was coming from downstairs. One important thing about our dog Ace is that he has a collapsed trachea. He needs medicine to help calm the condition down, so I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night to give him medicine. I proceeded downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere throughout the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping. He wasn't in the kitchen. He was nowhere to be found. I didn't check my mom's room, however, as to make sure I didn't wake her. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he had been in there anyway, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the cough again, but it was coming from further away, as if from outside. I looked over at the side patio door leading out into the woods, and realized I had forgotten to shut it. There it stood, slightly ajar. "Shit," I thought to myself, "he got out." I immediately ran outside with the flashlight and started calling for my dog. "Ace! Ace!" I shouted into neighboring trees. I heard another cough and shined my light in its direction. That time, it had echoed from down the gravel road. I swear, a path had never looked so terrifyingly desolate before in my life than that night. As I stared down that same gravel road that had led us to our new home. But in that moment, I thought my dog was lost, and I chalked it up to new house jitters, so I pressed onward. "Ace! Come on, boy! Home's this way!" That's when I heard it. The cough I had been following, almost right beside me. But this time, it didn't stay like the dry cough I had been hearing. Instead, the cough had slowly descended into a low growl. I shined my light towards the new sound. There stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. For a moment, I figured it was some kind of sick fox I had mistaken for my dog. The whole time, as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me. Its eyes glowed from the light of my flashlight. However, our stare broke when it tilted its head to the right. I looked down, and there she was, our neighbor's little black cat standing beside me. However, it was as if she had completely changed persona. She was no longer the happy, affectionate cat I had come to know. Instead, she had her back arched upright, every fiber of hair standing at attention, and uttered the lowest growl I had ever heard come out of a feline. In that moment, I figured that she was just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to coax her away and avoid the fox hurting her. But no matter how many times I tried to coax her out of fight mode, she wouldn't budge. Her stare remained unfazed. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more, but there wasn't a fox standing there anymore. Instead, in the exact same spot of the gravel road, was a walking, rotting corpse of a roadkill coyote, slowly moving towards me. I took a step back, absolutely horrified of what I was seeing. Its jaw was hanging loose from its face, one of its eyes was stained with blood, and it wobbled back and forth as if it was desperately fighting pain. I rubbed my eyes out of disbelief, hoping I was imagining it, but it was still there when my eyes reopened. Despite the gruesome scene before us, our neighbor's cat, no matter how tiny she was, stood there and kept growling at the creature. Suddenly it had stopped. The creature had ceased its walk towards us. For a moment it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me. That's when I unmistakably heard this beast mutter two solemn words in a low, gravelly voice. Damn. Black. In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it had completely vanished. Even the brush it had ran through looked completely untouched. That's when the cat, still standing beside me, calmed herself down, almost as if nothing had happened. She rubbed herself up against my leg, returning to her normal loving mood. Despite technically not being mine, I proceeded to scoop her up and run back into my house. Before heading upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms, I decided to poke my head into my mother's room. Laying on the floor, sound asleep, was Ace. He had been there the entire time. I quietly closed the door before bolting upstairs. I made sure that the cat slept with me the entire night in my bed. From some research that I've done, I think that I was almost the victim of some kind of skinwalker. It must have picked up on the sounds my dog sometimes makes late at night, knowing that I would likely come to his aid. For whatever reason, our neighbor's black cat had scared it so badly, it had scrambled away. I hadn't seen it since that night. Maybe because the same cat likes to wander down that gravel road late at night. Or maybe the thing just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, whether I have my father or pure luck to thank, I leave a can of food out every single night for that little cat. Oh, and the most ironic part of all, that cat's name is Halloween. Hey guys, Basement Horrors again, and welcome to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment, and share on social medias, and share with your friends and family as well to scare the crap out of them. I know this video is kind of longer than my regular videos, but so is the original Monsters of North America Legend, so I thought, why not make this one long too? So here's a 30-minute long video for you guys to sit down and listen to. I do hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, have a horrific day.